speaking of crisis, and I told you this was going to happen, so I'm going to just make this really quick. You can't appease an alligator, is what Winston Churchill told you. Vladimir Putin's an alligator. It is a crisis what's happening right now in Ukraine. The Ukraine-Russian war has claimed at least 2 million lives. Vladimir Putin did not go with the ceasefire, as we said last week. And Trump has been talking, he's going to put sanctions. And what does he do? Nothing. He folded. He said Trump says he will not impose new sanctions on Russia. Trump privately tells Europe leaders Putin isn't ready to end the war. Yeah, Donald, we know. You have to force him to end the war. But you're showing you're not the man to do it. You have no problem getting people to force people into your positions, into your political positions, like proposing to slap a tariff on the EU of 50%, slapping tariffs on China, on Canada, on Mexico. The list goes on. But when it comes to Vladimir Putin, who is arguably, if not absolutely responsible for the most deaths in this modern era because of his ambition and greed in this war, you do nothing. Your silence speaks so loudly. It's louder than an opera singer. That's how loud your silence is, Trump. And now you tell us why. I've been very patient, and I have stated plenty of times, if you will not play the same hardball tactics you do with other countries, tell us why. It's deafening. Well, at least the EU didn't wait. Without waiting for Trump, EU and Britain imposed new sanctions on Russia over Ukraine. Thank God for the EU. Alhamdulillah for the EU. Now, next week we're going to talk about the German Chancellor, Merz, I believe, is saying they could do more. And I want to get into that. But this is just absolutely, it's embarrassing. And it's a negligence of duty. My gosh, just to put sanctions? Just to put tariffs? When you've seen all of the atrocities that Vladimir Putin has exacted on Ukraine? Fail, Donald Trump. Failure. And let me say, there's been a lot of buzz or a lot of news around, Trumpian policies, these far-right policies. And if they're catching on. But I have to say, I think part of the reason they have it in a few countries is because they're worried about how Donald Trump is handling this Ukraine-EU issue and also how he's handling the Gaza issue, which we're going to get to in a moment. But first, I want to just put a bow tie on this. And I guess we're just going over today. We're just going to let it go. We're just going to have a long podcast. So if you're listening now, take a break, come back. That's the beautiful thing. Chapters by Spotify. I'm just going to keep it going. I feel like I'm on a roll. And I do not want to finish this because it all ties in. There's an anti-Trumpian sentiment building in the world. Now, not in the UK, where Nigel Farage has done well. But in Australia, where they just had recent elections, Anthony Albanese, the part of the Australian Labor Party, in this 2025 elections, in the federal elections, it was a landmark election for the Australian Labor Party. Under Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, they had a historic victory by winning 94 of the 150 seats. You only need 75 to have a majority in the government, right? They got 94. So give us another 19 in their House of Representatives, which is, like ours or the House of Commons. Let me tell you how significant this was. This not only marked the longest number of seats ever won by the party at the federal level since 1987, so like 40 years, a little less, 38 I guess, but like 40 years, but also represented the first time a single party achieved such a feat in Australian electoral history. Again, it's the first time any party in a federal election in Australia have achieved such a feat. Now, why did they have such a tsunami election? Why did they have a repudiation of the other party, which I believe was liberals? Because the liberals there were more aligned with Trump and Trumpian policies and far-right policies. And Labour was not. And so they had a huge wave election. We've already talked about in Canada how the Liberal Party there, now don't get confused, remember the names just, you got to know the politics, but the Liberal Party there is not aligned with Trump. It's the Conservative Party there. They weren't supposed to win, and because of Trump's rhetoric, what happened? The Liberal Party won. Now they're able to form a government. They don't have a majority there, but they're very close, and they'll work with their allies on the left to get things passed. But they were supposed to lose. Conservatives were supposed to have a majority in that government. They're up by 20 points. So Australia's Labour Party is like, thanks, Trump. That's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Prime Minister Carney for Canada is saying thanks to Trump as well. Finally, in Romania, the far-right candidate there, his name was, let me see if I have it for you, George Simeon. He was opposed to providing military aid to the UK. Man, I'm telling you, that alligator Vladimir Putin would have loved this guy. He was critical of the EU. He was on track to win the election. He swept the first round. And out of nowhere, this centrist independent, and what do you hear here? Centrist independent. This centrist independent ran. He was the mayor. His name is, I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong, Nicurso Dan. He was the former mayor of Bucharest. By the way, I really want to go to Bucharest. I think Bucharest was in one of those Mission Impossible movies. Almost positive. It looked beautiful. I've seen it online. It looks gorgeous. By the way, Mission Impossible came out this weekend. I haven't had a chance to see it yet. I'm all about it. I can't wait to see it. But getting back to this, they defeated the far-right candidate, and he is a proponent of the EU. So you see here how there is starting to build an anti-Trumpian sentiment in the world. Now, one, you could say with Romania, it could be worried about how he's handling the Russia-Ukraine affair, or war, excuse me. In Canada, it was because of the tariffs and the imperialist colonial talks that he has been espousing. And in Australia, they just don't like the dude, apparently. Remember in another podcast, and this will be our last story before we go ahead and get to the funny stories. I'm not going to even tell you where we're at because I know I have you and you're just listening and you're loving it. So, in the second podcast, we talked about how Prime Minister Carney said if the U.S. will not lead, perhaps Canada will. And we talked about why Canada could lead. That if the United States was going to go isolationist, which they're doing in regards to their economic policy with tariffs, in regards to their foreign policy, like they're not applying sanctions or tariffs on Ukraine, not on Ukraine, excuse me, in the Ukraine war on Russia. Remember, Donald Trump campaigned to end wars. So how is he doing on that campaign promise? Miserable. Not doing it in Ukraine and Russia. And then, how's he doing in the Middle East? Just as bad. He's not applying any pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. So Canada said they will lead. Now, how are they leading now? Well, on that podcast, we talked about what they were doing economically. But now on the world stage, in the geopolitical sphere, they've joined with France and the United Kingdom to go ahead and say that if Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't take a reverse action, come to the negotiating table, allow for humanitarian aid to get into Gaza because children and people are starving, that they are threatening to apply sanctions. Benjamin Netanyahu was incensed. Well, it's not hard, Netanyahu. You have people protesting in your own country. They're still protesting in Tel Aviv. They want their hostages home. Come to the negotiating table. Allow aid into Gaza where there are children starving, women and children starving, and get back to the negotiating table with Hamas, and you don't have to worry about sanctions. See, Canada is leading. France is leading. The UK is leading. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's talking about the Riviera in the Middle East. Let me read you this statement because it's so powerful. This comes out of the United Kingdom, out of the Prime Minister office. I was going to say number 10, but if you're in the United States, you wouldn't know. But they call it number 10 because I think it's on, the address is 10 and there's a street. I can't remember the name of the street. It might be Downing Street. But anyways, this is what they wrote. It's really powerful. We strongly oppose the expansion of Israel's military operations in Gaza. The level of human suffering in Gaza is intolerable. Yesterday's announcement that Israel will allow a basic quantity of food into Gaza is wholly inadequate. We call on the Israeli government, which is just Netanyahu because he's pretty much has sacked the rest of his government, by the way, to stop its military operations in Gaza and immediately allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. This must include engaging with the UN to ensure a return to delivery of aid in line with humanitarian principles. Yes, we want to be humanitarian. We also call on Hamas to release immediately the remaining hostages from 7th of October. And here's where it gets really interesting. The Israeli government denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population is unacceptable and risks breaching international humanitarian law. They don't want to do that because then you're going to get to go to The Hague. We condemn the abhorrent language used recently by members of the Israeli government threatening that in their despair at the destruction of Gaza, civilians will start to relocate. Permanent forced displacement is a breach of international humanitarian law. Now, let me say this really quick. I just want to go ahead and clarify. Now, I don't know the exact definitions. I got this from ChatGPT, so it could be a little off, and I will check it out. But ethnic cleansing is when you try to go ahead and, remove the population either by relocation or by you ethnically cleansing them. A genocide is when you're completely focused on obliterating that population, that ethnicity, that nationality, like what happened to the Jews. Now, one truth is, whatever you hate, you become. And some people are already calling it a genocide. It is getting close. I would still say ethnic cleansing, but the reason why it's not is because this is focused on Hamas, not on all Palestinian people, which then it would be a genocide. But let me say this, and this is why I said this line is important, that the Israeli government denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population is unacceptable and risks breaching international humanitarian law that affects all the Palestinians living there in Gaza. If you don't allow humanitarian aid in and say, well, you know what, starvation is collateral damage, that may be enough to consider it a genocide. So it's time, Israelis, you don't want to be known as a country, as a people who committed a genocide after it happened to you. I know you don't. So it's time to really stand up to Netanyahu and have him get back to the negotiating table and have him allow that aid to get through. It continues. We will not stand by while Netanyahu's government pursues these egregious acts. If Israel does not cease the renewed military offensive and lifts its restrictions on humanitarian aid, we will take further concrete actions in response. Boom! And see, Canada is leading for our side of the hemisphere. They're saying they're going to put sanctions. Meanwhile, what is Donald Trump doing? I'm telling you, he's talking about building hotels. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be gorgeous. You're going to love it. And now I jest. He has done some things. I mean, they did come to the table. They were a part of this first ceasefire, the ceasefire that occurred. So he has done some things. But the reason why I say that is because recently he has not done anything, or at least not enough. So what could he do? Maybe he doesn't want to apply sanctions because, Israel is one of our closest allies. Okay. Considering that Canada, France, and the UK are, I think you could get on board with them. But let's say you don't want to do that because the United States is very close to Israel. Okay. Because there's such a pejorative stigma when you hear sanctions. What he could do, is use his hardball tactics that he's done with other countries with tariffs. We do $37 billion of trade with Israel. It's our highest trading partner in the Middle East. The second is the United Arab Emirates at $34 billion, and then Saudi at $25 billion. Come on, Donald. Why don't you tell Netanyahu, if he doesn't allow aid in and stop their advancement of military operations in Gaza and don't come back to the negotiating table, that you'll slap him with a 50% tariff? Where are you, Donald Trump, when it comes to the wars in Gaza and Ukraine? You campaigned on ending wars. Sure, your words are strong, but your actions are weak. And actions speak louder than words. And that's essentially what Sir Winston Churchill meant when he said you can't appease an alligator. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think if Sir Winston Churchill was here right now, he'd call you an appeaser. Your policies are very much in line with those who appeased in the past. You're having an appeasement-like policy in Gaza and an appeasement-like policy in Ukraine. Well, towards Russia, but in the Ukraine-Russia war. Again, I always give credit where credit is due. There was a momentary ceasefire, but you did nothing to follow that up in Ukraine and Russia. There was also a brief break, a pause in the war against Israel and Hamas. We were in the first stage trying to get to the second stage. So you started off well, but you haven't followed up since then. What? Have you lost interest? Are you just a sprinter? It's a marathon, Donald. 4 years. You know that. You were in office the first time for 4 years. So come on. go ahead and tell Netanyahu that if he won't allow humanitarian aid into Gaza and come back to the negotiating table, he's going to get a 50% tariff. And you don't have to worry about the sanctions. Canada, who's leading for our side of the hemisphere, the United Kingdom, and France will do that. Perhaps Germany will join too. I think they might. Okay, let's get to the funny stories, and that's going to be about it. This was the longest podcast ever, but you know what? We had to get through this material. I didn't want to save it for next week. So now we get to go ahead and end on a light-hearted note. Sometimes I drink in my podcast. I told you that. I'm doing that right now because I feel like this podcast has been incredible. I'm drinking a Monster right now, by the way. Ultra Sunrise. I love my Monsters. Okay, first, I asked you, where was the craziest place that you have ever heard of or experienced your wife, or if you're the wife, experiencing labor? I mean, I've heard some crazy stories. When I get worried, on a plane, that would be crazy. Hopefully there's a doctor there, or an OBGYN, or a nurse, or a midwife, on a train, in a car. It can get scary. But this has to be one of the most unusual, unique, and I would say also anxious and tense moments or tense places to start in labor. It was at a news station, Albany News. Anchor Olivia Jaquith went into labor just moments before her morning broadcast on WRGB Wednesday, May 21st. Incredible. You're about to go on the air and all of a sudden your water breaks. I told you. Can you believe that? You're like, okay, we're about to go on air. Hold on, I'm feeling something wet. 5, 4, oh my gosh, my water just broke. 3, what? Your water broke? 2, 1, you're on. Now, how did she handle it? Was she cool and composed? Or was she like the anchor man who ended up saying, beep you, San Diego, instead of stay classy, San Diego? Oh, Ron. For those who haven't seen Anchorman, you need to see it. What did she do? She didn't miss a beat. She acted like a true professional. She finished the broadcast, if you could believe that. Her co-anchor said, we have some breaking news of our own this morning. Olivia's water literally has just broke, and she is anchoring the newsroom in active labor. Incredible. And Olivia, I gotta say, Olivia, was this your first child? I gotta assume it wasn't. Because she said early labor. Let's not get carried away. That sounds like someone that's not their first rodeo. What a story. I can't believe that. That's incredible. Well, I told you. I don't know. You tell me. React to me on the Facebook page if you think that's the most unique and just crazy places to start labor. I think it's got to be up there. Speaking of crazy or unusual, I don't know which story to go to next. I'm going to go with this story and save the other one for last. Now, again, living on the coast is fantastic. Unless you wake up to a 443-foot-long boat that's literally in your front yard. You say, what? Yes. A man in Norway awoke early Thursday morning to discover a huge container ship had run aground a stone's throw from his house. Now, this is in Norway, so he's on a fjord. I mean, it's beautiful there. I mean, can you imagine that? You wake up, you get your coffee over there, maybe it's tea, I don't know. Look out your window, and it's this 443-pound boat. You're like, did I forget something? Is this like some sort of cruise? Did I win? Who do I call to remove the boat? Who do you call? Ghostbusters? Do you call the Coast Guard there? I don't know if it's a Coast Guard. I mean, incredible. And my question is, how does that work? Now, you sometimes hear of kids like running into houses, or, you know, they fall asleep on the wheel and they hit a car or something. Now, let me say this. I'm not promoting this in any way or advocating it. It's horrible. But then, you know, you walk up to the house or, you know, to the person and, you know, you say, this is what happened. How did this transpire? This guy came off this 443-pound boat, knocked on his door and said, sorry, I fell asleep on the wheel? Or was he drunk and my boat now is a stone's throw away? The owner of the house, Johann Helsberg, said he was really worried that if it had gone up another place, like maybe a little more down, it might have hit his house. He says, you know, he says right here, it was many meters. It was only a few meters off. Now, none of the 16 crew members were injured. That's good. And the cause of the incident is still being investigated by Norwegian police. Here's my thing. The CEO, Bente Hedlund, of the shipping company that owns, in the name of this boat, this massive boat, is the NCL Sovereign, told TV2 that the same ship ran aground twice before. Once in 2023 and another time in 2024 in towns called Hadsel and Allison. I'm sure, not Allison, Alson. I'm not pronouncing them right. How has this boat run aground or come up on the ground, has come up on the ground 3 times? Has it been the same driver? Then he definitely is an alcoholic. Send him to rehab and then to a 12-step group. Almost got in trouble there. I mean, and if it wasn't the same driver, then what's with this boat? This specific boat must be haunted. It likes to go on ground. I mean, maybe it doesn't want to be a boat. I mean, maybe it wants to be on land. I mean, it keeps going to land. I mean, what? We have transgender. People want to change their gender from male to female or female to male. Maybe this boat wants to be a hovercraft. Or maybe it wants to be a car. Like, I guess if it was a car, it'd be a monster truck. This thing is massive. And finally, ending on boats, there was this guy, and he's in his early 20s. And here's what I talked to you about. How do you define a midlife crisis? He's from Oregon. Like, do you define the midlife crisis of age or your actions? Now, remember, we were talking about the movie American Beauty, where the guy just quits his job, buys this fast car, is eating hamburgers, saying I rule. By the way, that movie ends really poorly. It's one of the hardest endings I've ever seen in any movie. But, you know, a midlife crisis, some guy, you know, he buys a Harley and then takes off on a trip. And, I mean, you know, you have all these stories. You can look them up. You can literally Google midlife crisis stories or YouTube it. Well, what did he do? He's in his early 20s or maybe late 20s. He's in his 20s. And he said, he got on TikTok, says, I can't stand my job. It's sucking my life away. He was like in a management position at a tire shop, a management position in a tire shop. The name of it's Discount Tires. By the way, Discount Tires is really nice. You should check it out if you have one. But he said he couldn't do it anymore. And he said he was going to quit his job, buy a boat, and just sail the rest of his life. He liquidated his retirement. That is midlife crisis proof number 1. I'm going to buy a boat. Midlife crisis number 2. Check. Point. I'm going to sail the world. Midlife crisis number 3. Checkpoint. But he's young, so you're like, wow. And, you know, I saw the clip on TikTok. It was actually really cool. He's like, I can't do this job anymore. It's draining me. I'm just going to buy a boat and just sail the world. I mean, it gets very bohemian, right? But I'm going to tell you this. For every one of these, there are so many people who do this, and then they end up homeless. Not homeless with a master's degree, probably, which I was. And by the way, my book, which is soon to be published by Olympia Publishers, is called How I Became Homeless with a Master's Degree. I did not have a retirement to liquidate, by the way. But I wouldn't liquidate your retirement to buy a boat ever. Would not do that. Don't do it. But he did. And he seems happy. So, you know, it brings up this question. I mean, is this guy like, you know, a rebel saying I'm going to live the way I want, fighting against, like, you know, the drudgery of life? Or is he like some early midlife crisis kid who's doing midlife crisis too early, and 30 years from now he's going to be like, what did I do? Now I'm on a boat. I can't buy money for food. I have scurvy. I mean, I don't know where to place him. Now, but here's what's really interesting. Now, he doesn't know how to sail, so this is really to his credit. He learned how to sail. That's fantastic. And he took his boat, and he said, I'm going to Hawaii. Well, why not? And he went to Honolulu. But for some reason, I mean, he became an internet sensation on TikTok, a social media sensation with his, you know, his videos, with his TikToks. And he was consistently posting about his voyage all the way to Honolulu, Hawaii with his cat Phoenix. That's pretty cool. So he wasn't totally by himself. And for some reason, the governor of Hawaii visited him at the Waikiki Yacht Club on Oahu. I don't understand that. What is he, a dignitary? I don't get it. I mean, why would the governor do that? I mean, whatever. I mean, I haven't been a governor, so what do I know? Like, maybe it's a good photo op, I guess? It just seems odd to me. Like, if the guy was in his 50s and he was married and or he was divorced and he took off, would the governor have come out? So I don't know. You tell me. I'm going to leave you there. Was it a midlife crisis, or is this a bohemian rebel saying, I'm going to live the way I want to, world? You can't force me into this 9-to-5 schedule. I refuse. I don't know. I mean, I hope he ends up having enough food for his cat. That's what I get worried about, is Phoenix. I want to make sure Phoenix is properly fed. Let me tell you, it's hard not to live without an income. Now, I don't know how much his retirement was, and I don't know how much the boat cost, because how much do you have left over? And if you're not going to work, how's he going to get food? Did he learn how to fish? He better. Man, I lived homeless. I'm telling you. How I became homeless with a master's degree. Now, it wasn't my intention. I did not plan to become homeless. You can read about it in the book. But I can tell you, it's really hard. It's hard some days. Now, once you finally get into a metropolitan area, once you learn where the food banks are and where the soup kitchens are, it's not as challenging. But just to let you know, and we'll end on this topic, we'll bring it a little serious here. Most places, they only give meals twice a day. Now, there was one place where I spent the most of my time in England, It was in the South, in the county of Sussex, called Chichester. And there you could get meals, 3 meals free 3 times a day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everywhere else I've been to is just twice a day, in the morning and the afternoon. So, I mean, I don't know what this guy is planning. And how is he going to do that? Like, you have to, like, get to a harbor if you're hungry and then find the soup kitchen or the food bank. I guess he's probably going to do food bank because hopefully the boat he got has a kitchen on it. Now, if he did that, then you know what? He might be able to do it. Honestly, I hope he continues his TikToks and continues saying, you know, how I'm continuing to live, you know, as a sailor on the seas, just sailing the world. I want to know how he's continuing to eat. I think that would be, to me, that's more fascinating, how he will continue to live this life instead of getting to Hawaii, which is still impressive, especially if you've never sailed before. But it becomes kind of like a Survivor show, right? Like, people can put bets. Now, I'm not trying to advocate that, by the way. I don't bet, and I don't advocate gambling. And if you have an issue with gambling, call a hotline and get help. But it would be interesting. Like, people would place bets. How long before he stops sailing the world and goes back to a corporate job at Discount Tires or some other retail store or service store because he has a management position, so he has some experience. But careful, bro. Remember, employers look at how long you've been unemployed for. His name is Oliver Widger, if you're interested. You can find him on TikTok. So be careful, Oliver. You can only go so long before, you know what, on your resume, even though you had management experience, it's not going to overshadow that you've been unemployed for, who knows, 5 years. But for those who've seen Forrest Gump, this is kind of like his Forrest Gump movement. Forrest Gump episode, right? Like Forrest Gump's like, I'm just gonna run. This guy says, I'm just gonna sail. So we'll have to see. I'm gonna stay tuned, check in every now and then. Okay, we went way over, but I don't care. This was a phenomenal podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to El Maestro. Let me tell you, what you got was 2 for 1 today. Like, for those baseball fans, it's like a doubleheader. And speaking of sports, really quick, since we're on it, hey, over there in the UK, Chelsea, my Chelsea qualified for the Champions League, and I know my Brit friend over there loves Arsenal. So exciting times. We're gonna go ahead and end it there. Thank you for listening to El Maestro. And like I said, if you were watching baseball, you got a doubleheader, 2 games for the price of 1 ticket. You got 2 podcasts instead of just 1. Have a great evening. I will see you in a couple days. And stay lit.